At 7:15 on the evening of the 8th of May 1987, a blue Toyota Hiace van drove past the RUC station at Loughgall in County Armagh. Inside the van were 5 men. Behind the van, a JCB digger carried a 200-pound bomb in its bucket. The driver of the JCB was Declan Arthurs. He was 21. Patrick Kelly commanded the operation. He was 30. Within minutes, all 8 members of the IRA East Tyrone Brigade Active Service Unit aboard those 2 vehicles would be dead. Within that same contact, an unconnected civilian named Anthony Hughes, driving home from work in a 3rd vehicle, would also be dead. The British soldiers who killed them didn't testify in any court. They aren't named in any document the British government has been willing to release. And the IRA didn't lose a fight that big again. Loughgall is a village in North County Armagh, 12 miles from Dungannon. Its RUC station was part-time in 1987, open from 9 to 11 each morning and again from 5 to 7 in the evening. 3 local constables worked it. On the night of the 8th of May, that station had just closed for the night. The IRA unit had timed their arrival for the closing hour, when the officers would still be inside finishing up. They had done this before. Patrick Kelly became East Tyrone Brigade commander in 1985. He was 28 years old when he took command. He'd been arrested in February 1982, released after a 15-minute trial in October 1983. Jim Lynagh, born in Monaghan town in 1956, the son of a large family raised on the Tully estate on the town's southern edge, was a sitting Sinn Féin councillor for Monaghan Urban District Council at the time of his death. The Garda Síochána had arrested and interrogated him repeatedly without ever securing a conviction. Pádraig McKearney, 32, had been one of 38 prisoners who escaped from the Maze prison on the 25th of September 1983. By early 1984, he was back on active service. Together, Kelly, Lynagh and McKearney turned the East Tyrone Brigade into what several military historians have since described as one of the most capable armed units the Provisional IRA ever fielded. The strategy behind their campaign had a name, in Lynagh's framing. Drawing on Mao Zedong and the theory of revolutionary warfare, he'd worked out a strategy of armed struggle adapted to the geography of rural Ulster. The plan was to destroy isolated security force bases, then intimidate any contractor who tried to rebuild them. One station levelled, then another, the British footprint in East Tyrone shrinking station by station until the area became effectively ungovernable. The IRA's Northern Command approved a scaled-down version of it. East Tyrone went to work. On 7th December 1985, Kelly and Lynagh led the assault on Ballygawley RUC barracks. Reserve Constable William Clements and Constable George Gilliland were shot dead at the front gate. The building was raked with automatic fire. A 100-pound bomb placed inside destroyed the structure. 3 further officers were wounded. Declan Arthurs was part of that team. The Ruger revolver taken from Constable Clements's body that night stayed in the unit's possession. It would be recovered at Loughgall 17 months later. The digger bomb tactic itself came later. On the 11th of August 1986, at the part-time RUC station at the Birches in County Armagh, Kelly drove a stolen JCB with a large bomb in the bucket through the perimeter fence, while the rest of the team opened fire on the building. The station was empty. 3 civilians nearby were injured. No one died. But the method had its first real test. British intelligence had now seen a JCB used as a bomb delivery vehicle. When a report came in early May 1987 that a mechanical digger was going to be used in a terrorist attack on an RUC station, analysts knew exactly what that looked like. The precise source of the intelligence that preceded Loughgall isn't confirmed in any released document. The public record indicates surveillance and the possibility of communications intercept. What the sources confirm is that British forces had at least 10 days of warning about the specific target, and at least 24 hours before the attack itself. The RUC secretly evacuated Loughgall Station's officers. The SAS began moving into position. The operation was designated Operation Judy. British forces, over 30 soldiers and several RUC officers, arrived at the station in the early hours of the 8th of May. Under the command of Soldier A, they took 6 positions around the building. Soldiers A through F, 6 men in plain clothes, occupied the interior, positioning at the first floor windows. Outside, 4 soldiers in uniform settled into a wooded area south of the Loughgall Road near the junction toward Armagh. A second group of 4 concealed themselves in woodland, generally opposite number 202 Loughgall Road. A third group of 4 positioned near Ballygacy Cottage. 3 soldiers took a wooded position to the rear of St Luke's Church, east of the station. A 6th group of 3 covered a wooded area to the north of the road, 300 to 400 yards behind the station. The weapons they carried included M16 rifles, H&K G3 rifles, and at least 2 L7A2 general-purpose machine guns. The station ran its normal schedule. It opened at 9, closed at 11, reopened at 5, closed again at 7. Nothing visible had changed. No one in the village had been warned. That decision, deliberately not sealing off the area so as not to alert the IRA, was recorded and later produced in evidence. It would matter. At roughly 2:30 in the afternoon, 2 masked men hijacked the blue Toyota Hiace from a man named Mr. Core, working at a snooker club on Mountjoy Road in Dungannon. He was told to wait 4 hours before calling the police. He did. At around 6 that evening, armed men arrived at the Mackle family farm in Lynagh Upper near Dungannon. They needed the digger. One of the Mackle sons filled it with diesel. In the yard, a bomb in an oil drum was prepared and placed in the front bucket. By 6:50, the digger had left the yard. The Mackle family tried to phone the police. Their line was dead. Their neighbour's line was dead. 2 sons eventually found a patrol. By the time they did, it was already over. The unit arrived in Loughgall from the northeast shortly after 7. They were armed with 3 H&K G3 rifles, an FNF-AL, 2 FNF-NCs, the Franchi SPAS-12 shotgun, and the Ruger revolver last seen at Ballygawley. They wore blue boiler suits, flak jackets, gloves and balaclavas. The digger and van both made reconnaissance passes of the station, driving past, turning around, driving back again. Some members of the unit noticed the station looked too quiet. There was a debate. They went ahead. Tony Gormley and Gerard O'Callaghan moved from the van to the digger, riding alongside Arthurs, a weapon in one hand and a lighter in the other. The other 5 remained in the van, Eugene Kelly driving, Patrick Kelly in the passenger seat, Lynagh, McKearney and Seamus Donnelly in the rear. Between 7:15 and 7:30, the van parked outside the station. According to the British Security Forces account, corroborated by the ECHR proceedings, a man emerged from the rear of the van, raised his rifle and opened fire on the building. Soldiers A through E at the first floor windows returned fire immediately. Patrick Kelly came out of the van and also fired, along with several others. The driver then exited and fired. The digger crashed through the perimeter fence. The two 40-second fuses were lit. The van was hit from multiple angles. Men took cover behind it, then inside it. Soldiers fired through the sides. Soldier B received a facial injury from broken glass. Then the bomb detonated. Masonry and dust across the road. Constable C suffered a fractured skull, broken facial bones, a broken finger and a broken toe. Constables B and C were led outside by the third officer and an SAS soldier. The men inside the station moved toward the front and continued firing until there was no movement near the van. The security forces later recovered 600 spent cartridge cases from their weapons at the scene. The IRA had fired 78 rounds. What nobody had accounted for was a white Citroën following the van into Loughgall at the same moment the contact began. Driving it was Anthony Hughes, 36 years old, Catholic, married with 3 children, returning from a job repairing a lorry on the other side of the village. His brother Oliver was in the passenger seat. Oliver was wearing blue overalls, the same shade as the IRA team's boiler suits. The Citroën had been right behind the van. After shooting started, it began to reverse. Soldiers S, T and U opened fire on it from behind. Anthony Hughes died at the wheel, his seatbelt still buckled. Oliver got out, despite being told not to. He was hit by gunfire and fell. He survived. He'd been struck 14 times. Anthony Hughes's post-mortem examination recorded 29 wounds in a car with approximately 34 bullet holes. The road hadn't been closed. That was a deliberate operational choice. Anthony Hughes drove into a kill zone the British state had left open. An IRA scout positioned outside the village later recalled, "It went on and on and on for what seemed like 3 or 4 minutes. It was fierce firing." 8 men killed. All had multiple gunshot wounds. All had been shot in the head. Patrick Kelly was 30. He'd led East Tyrone Brigade since 1985, commanded the Ballygawley operation, and was found at the front of the van, a rifle on his body. Debris on the weapon indicated he'd been on the ground before the bomb went off. Jim Lynagh was 31. He was a sitting Sinn Féin councillor for Monaghan Urban District Council. He was found diagonally across the van's interior, feet toward the rear door, ammunition in his jacket pockets. Pádraig McKearney was 32. He'd walked out of the Maze prison in 1983 with 37 other men. He was found face down in the rear of the van, a flak jacket on, a dozen wounds to his torso and head. Declan Arthurs was 21. He'd driven the digger. He was found in a lane opposite the Loughgall Football Club, not wearing a boiler suit. He was unarmed. The forensic examination found a cigarette lighter near his right hand. A soldier approaching the body had seen something metallic in the clenched fist and fired 2 rounds. Soldier X confirmed it was the lighter. Tony Gormley was 24. He'd ridden the digger. He was found on the pavement at the north side of the van. Eugene Kelly was 25. He'd been at the wheel when the van stopped. He died in the driver's seat. Gerard O'Callaghan was 28. He'd also been on the digger. 12 wounds were recorded at post-mortem. Seamus Donnelly was 19. He was found near the north side of the van. The pathologist noted at least 20 separate missile wounds. One entry wound on the neck showed the gun muzzle had been within several feet of his body when the shot was fired, meaning he'd already been on the ground. He was the youngest of the 8. and Anthony Hughes. He was 36. He had no operational role. He had no connection to East Tyrone Brigade. He was from Moy, County Tyrone. He was driving his brother home after a day's work. His widow, Bridget Hughes, became one of the 9 named applicants in the legal case that followed. The funerals drew thousands, the largest Republican funerals in Northern Ireland since the hunger strikers of 1981. At Jim Lynagh's funeral mass, Gerry Adams noted that the priest's homily made no reference to how Lynagh had died, as though he had perished from natural causes rather than political violence. At the funeral of Anthony Gormley, Adams declared that Margaret Thatcher and Tom King would come to regret that Loughgall had happened. 6 months later, the Provisional IRA detonated a bomb at the Remembrance Sunday ceremony in Enniskillen, killing 11 civilians. In August 1988, a bomb destroyed a British Army bus near Ballygawley, killing 8 soldiers. East Tyrone Brigade wasn't broken. But Ed Maloney's research, cited by multiple historians, shows the brigade lost 28 members killed between 1987 and 1992, the highest casualty rate of any rural IRA unit in that period. Many of those who survived Loughgall were young and inexperienced. They fell into further ambushes. The political consequence is real, if more difficult to trace cleanly. The Armalite and ballot box strategy predated Loughgall by 6 years. The turn toward politics was underway before May 1987. But the loss of 8 experienced, irreplaceable operators in a single engagement, men who couldn't be replaced quickly, whose weapons were linked to every IRA fatality in Fermanagh and Tyrone in the months preceding the ambush, reinforced what Martin McGuinness and others around Sinn Féin had been arguing: that the British state wasn't going to be driven out by military pressure alone, and that political movement was the only path that could work. Loughgall didn't create that argument, it hardened it. The real IRA came a decade later. Michael McKevitt, the Provisional IRA's Quartermaster General, led dissenters out of the movement in 1997 after the Army Council accepted the Mitchell principles of non-violence. The direct connection to Loughgall is one thread in a much longer fracture. The split was triggered by 1997, not 1987. What Loughgall changed was what it meant to believe the campaign could be won. In September 1988, the Director of Public Prosecutions for Northern Ireland concluded that the evidence didn't warrant prosecution of anyone involved in the shootings. 6 families of IRA members and the Hughes family launched civil proceedings against the Ministry of Defence. In April 1991, Bridget Hughes settled out of court. A formal inquest opened in May 1995. It lasted 4 days. Lawyers for 6 families withdrew on the second day, after the coroner refused to release witness statements before witnesses testified. None of the soldiers appeared in person. Their statements were read aloud. The inquest concluded that all 9 had died from serious and multiple gunshot wounds. The families took the case to Strasbourg. The correct citation is Kelly and others versus the United Kingdom, application 30054/96. The third section of the European Court of Human Rights heard the case, with admissibility decided on April 4, 2000. On May 4, 2001, the court ruled that the United Kingdom had violated Article 2 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The same day it issued a parallel ruling in McKearney versus United Kingdom, a case arising from a 1982 RUC shooting near Lynagh. Together, these 4 Northern Ireland judgments handed down that day established the procedural framework that Article 2 now requires: independence, effectiveness, transparency and public scrutiny of any investigation into deaths caused by state agents. The Kelly ruling requires precision. The court didn't find that the killings themselves were unlawful. The substantive question, whether the force used was proportionate, wasn't decided against Britain. What the court found was a procedural violation. The investigation hadn't been independent and transparent. Families had been denied witness statements. Soldiers hadn't given public evidence. The inquiry failed the minimum standard that Article 2 requires. The investigation was inadequate. That is what the court found. Britain was ordered to pay compensation and directed to ensure future compliance with the investigative obligation. The 9 judgments from those 2001 Northern Ireland Article 2 cases took more than 5 years to implement. New inquests were ordered in 2015. They hadn't been completed before the Northern Ireland Troubles Legacy and Reconciliation Act 2023 imposed a cut-off on inquest proceedings. In September 2024, the Northern Ireland Court of Appeal, in a judgment cited as NICA 59, upheld findings that provisions of the Legacy Act were incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. Brigid Hughes was one of the named applicants in those proceedings. The inquest still hasn't concluded. The PSNI has been required to trawl through nearly 10 million intelligence records for disclosure. The 2023 Legacy Act introduced conditional immunity mechanisms for Troubles-era veterans who disclose their roles to a new body. In 2025, the SAS Regimental Association pursued legal action against the government over Labour's plans to repeal or amend the Act. The veterans' concern is that proceedings open nearly 40 years after the event will produce prosecutions stripped of operational context. The family's concern is that without the SAS soldiers giving sworn public evidence, with their identities disclosed, no investigation can meet what Article 2 demands. No public document establishes who authorised Operation Judy at political level. An operation of this scale and nature, conducted against a named target by 22 SAS, requires authorisation up the military command chain. And academic sources characterise operations of this type as requiring very senior military and political approval. Whether Margaret Thatcher was personally briefed before the evening of May 8th isn't established in any released record. One note from the period indicates the news of the ambush hadn't yet reached a meeting she was attending that night. What that suggests about the authorisation chain is a question the documents Britain has released don't answer. Mark Urban's book, Big Boys Rules, which covered the operation, was subject to a government suppression attempt. A declassified file documenting that attempt was later deposited in the National Archives. The book is available. The files aren't. The 2011 Historical Inquiries team found the IRA fired first, that the unit couldn't have been safely arrested, and that the SAS was justified in opening fire. The 2001 European Court found the investigation that followed wasn't good enough. Those two findings coexist in the record without resolving each other. Loughgall ended in a matter of minutes. The arguments about it are 39 years old. The SAS men who fired are still alive, still anonymous, still not named in the documents Britain has been willing to release. The grandchildren of the dead IRA volunteers walk down roads named after them. Anthony Hughes' family still wants an answer, and the Provisional IRA, on the night of the 8th of May 1987, had a decision to make about whether what they were doing was working. The decision they made changed Ireland. If you found this useful, subscribe.